A harsh coughing sound scraped against my eardrums like a blunt knife rasping over them. My eyes flew open. The sharp pain in my chest from being pushed down the stairs still throbbed. Familiar military green curtains came into view. Sunlight slipped through the cracks, casting dappled shadows across the wooden table. The enamel mug printed with "Serve the People" still sat on the table, in the exact spot I always kept it. Everything was identical to that afternoon 3 years ago, the day he forced me to divorce him. Cough, cough, cough. Zhang Guoqiang sat on the wooden stool across from me, leaning slightly forward. One hand clutched his chest tightly while the other braced against his knee. He hacked so violently, it seemed he might pass out at any moment. He wore that faded military green tank top, his face an unnatural pallor. Yet there wasn't the slightest sickly yellow tint of real illness. A flicker of impatient evasion hid in his eyes. I tightened my fingers under the blanket, nails digging deep into my palms. In my last life, I had been fooled by this exact terminally ill act. I cried and begged him not to give up, quit my job to take care of him with all my heart. In the end, right before his wedding to Wang Li, they pushed me down the stairs. I didn't even get an apology. Zhang Guoqiang finally managed to stop coughing. His voice was weak as a candle flame in the wind, but his eyes kept darting toward the door. The doctor said my illness probably won't get better. It'll cost a lot long-term and require constant care. I don't want to drag you down. He paused, clearly waiting for me to burst into tears and protest. But I simply watched him quietly, observing how he would continue this little performance. Let's get a divorce. He forced out the words with difficulty, then quickly added, "You're still young, and quite good-looking. Find yourself a healthy man and live a good life. Don't waste your life on a useless man like me." A very light footstep sounded from the doorway. I didn't need to look to know it was Wang Li, the woman who always wore floral dresses. Called me sister-in-law sweetly to my face, then turned around and hooked herself onto Zhang Guoqiang's arm. She was definitely clinging to the doorframe right now, eavesdropping. In my previous life, I had collapsed on the spot when I heard those words. I hugged his leg, sobbing that I would sell everything we owned to treat his illness. But he was determined to divorce. In the end, he even took the family's only 20 yuan in savings, claiming it was for medicine. I softly uttered a single word. My voice was so calm it surprised even me. Zhang Guoqiang's coughing stopped abruptly. He lifted his head in disbelief. The hand still pressed to his chest forgot to move. The feigned frailty in his eyes was instantly replaced by stunned disbelief. "What did you say?" "I said I agree to the divorce." I sat up. The blanket slid down, revealing my wrist. There were no burn scars there yet, the ones I would later earn from taking whatever work I could find to buy a medicine. "When do we handle the paperwork?" "I'll pack my things right now." He was completely stunned, mouth hanging open, unable to speak for a long time. The sickly expression he had forced onto his face crumbled significantly. The footsteps at the door paused, followed by faint rustling. Wang Li clearly hadn't expected me to agree so readily either. Zhang Guoqiang seemed to want to say something else, perhaps, pretend to persuade me to think it over, or describe his condition as even more dire. But when he met my calm gaze, all his prepared lines got stuck in his throat. He opened and closed his mouth, finally squeezing out, Aren't you going to think it over some more?" "I don't need to." I threw off the blanket and got out of bed, my movements crisp and decisive. "Since you're doing this, for my own good, let's not waste any more time." Seeing the panic he couldn't hide in his eyes, the corners of my lips curved into a faint cold arc. "Zhang Guoqiang. Wang Li. In this life, it's your turn to taste hardship. Zhang Guoqiang's mouth was still agape, his eyes blank, as if he hadn't fully processed my agreement to divorce. At that moment, the cloth curtain at the door was gently lifted. Wang Li walked in carrying an enamel bowl. A few vegetable leaves floated in the steaming porridge. The moment she sensed the wrong atmosphere in the room, she immediately put on a worried expression and lightened her steps. Brother Guoqiang, I made you some vegetable porridge. You just finished coughing, drink this to soothe your throat. As she spoke, her peripheral gaze swept over me quickly. Seeing me already standing by the wardrobe, sorting through my things, a flash of surprise crossed her eyes before she continued her act. Zhang Guoqiang seemed to have finally found an excuse. He coughed a couple more times but didn't touch the porridge. He just looked at me. Yun, are you really not going to reconsider? Divorce isn't a small matter. If word gets out, it won't be good for your reputation. I was folding a floral shirt I had bought before marriage. I raised my head, and my gaze fell on the paper box at the corner of the table labeled ginseng tonic. In my last life, I had gone out of my way to have someone bring it back from the provincial capital, spending half a month's wages. He had never even opened it. Only later did I learn he had secretly given it to Wang Li. Whatever happens to my reputation, it's still better than staying with a man who's pretending to be sick. I pointed at the box. My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for both of them to hear clearly. I bought this tonic supplement just last week. The instructions say to take it twice a day. If you're really as seriously ill as you claim, why hasn't the box even been opened? Zhang Guoqiang's face flushed red instantly. He fumbled in panic to block the box, but accidentally knocked over the nearby porridge bowl. The bowl shattered on the floor, porridge spilling everywhere. The steam quickly dispersed, revealing nothing but watery rice gruel thin enough to reflect a face, with only a few limp vegetable leaves floating in it. Wang Li's expression changed as well. She hurriedly squatted down to pick up the fragments. Oh dear, it's all my fault. My hand slipped. Brother Guoqiang, don't be angry. I'll go make you another bowl. No need. I placed the folded clothes into a canvas bag, then pulled out the wooden box my mother had left me from under the bed. Inside were a few pieces of jewelry, and the several dozen yuan I had saved before marriage. I've packed everything that needs packing. Let's go handle the divorce procedures. Now, better to get it done now before anything can complicate matters. Zhang Guoqiang wanted to say something more, but a neighbor's voice suddenly came from outside the courtyard. Anyone home at Guoqiang's place? I just stewed some chicken soup for Guoqiang. Aunt Zhang pushed the door open. She saw the broken bowl on the floor, Zhang Guoqiang standing there frozen, and then the canvas bag on my shoulder. Her eyes immediately filled with confusion. What's going on here? Why is the bowl broken? Yun, where are you going? Wang Li spoke up first, her voice carrying a trace of grievance. Auntie Zhang, it was my fault, I accidentally dropped it. Yun is packing to leave. She says she wants to divorce Brother Guoqiang because his health is bad, and she doesn't want to stay tied to him. Her words seemed to be speaking for Zhang Guoqiang, but they actually confirmed his serious illness, while cutting off any chance of me backing out. I let out a cold laugh. Before Zhang Guoqiang could respond, I said to Aunt Zhang, Auntie Zhang, you came at just the right time. You can be our witness too. Guoqiang claims he has a serious illness and wants a divorce. But the tonic I bought for him hasn't even been opened. He was speaking to me normally just now, and he doesn't look anything like someone who's seriously ill. I agree to the divorce, but I want everything made clear. It's not that I'm abandoning him, because he's sick, he's the one who wants to leave. Aunt Zhang paused, her gaze shifting between Zhang Guoqiang and the unopened supplement box. Understanding dawned in her eyes. The way she looked at Zhang Guoqiang now carried a hint of scrutiny. Zhang Guoqiang could no longer keep up the act. He was anxious and furious, but couldn't find words to refute her. He could only stiffen his neck and say, "Since you've put it like that, let's go to the Civil Affairs office, right now." I didn't bother wasting more words with him. I grabbed the canvas bag and headed out. As I passed Wang Li, she looked up at me, a trace of triumph hidden in her eyes. I merely gave her a faint glance. That smug, little triumph of hers would turn into regret soon enough. Stepping out of the military dependence compound gate, sunlight fell on my body, warm enough to bring tears to my eyes. But I knew this wasn't the end, it was a brand new beginning. Carrying the canvas bag as I walked along the dirt road outside the military district compound, the soles of my shoes crunched over the gravel. No more sounds came from the direction of the dependence compound behind me. Zhang Guoqiang and Wang Li were probably busy dealing with Aunt Zhang's questions and had no time to bother with me. I didn't rush to find a place to stay. Instead, I walked slowly along the roadside. One side of the road was the high wall of the military district. Occasionally, figures in military uniforms could be seen coming out. Most were young officers. Some had frayed sleeve cuffs, others had pants that were clearly a bit too short, making their strides look awkward. When I reached the corner store, I heard two officers talking under the eaves. The tall one tugged at the hem of his uniform, frowning as he said, "These standard issue uniforms are made according to fixed sizes. I'm 1.10 meters tall, yet even the largest size feels tight around the waist. It feels so tight every time I go out on assignment." The shorter one chimed in, "Exactly. And the fabric isn't durable enough. Last time during tactical crawling training, the knees wore through completely. I wanted to find somewhere to alter them. But the tailors in town only make civilian clothes. They don't understand military patterns, so it ends up even worse after alteration." My heart stirred. I stopped and pretended to adjust my canvas bag while listening carefully. In my previous life, I had been completely focused on Zhang Guoqiang and never noticed these details. Only now did I realize this was a golden opportunity no one had seized yet. The officers in the military district came from all over the country. With varying heights and body types, the standard uniforms rarely fit properly. Plus, with all their training and missions, the clothes wore out quickly. They needed durable, well-fitted options. But nearby, there were only shops selling ready-made clothes or tailors making everyday civilian wear. There wasn't a single place specializing in custom military uniforms. If only there was somewhere that could make uniforms according to actual measurements. I'd be willing to pay extra, the tall officer said, and that settled it for me. I would open a tailoring shop that specialized in custom military uniforms for the officers in the military district. Carrying my bag, I headed toward the county town, already calculating what I would need. Shop space, fabric, a sewing machine, and tailoring skills. As for skills, my mother had been a well-known tailor in town before she passed. I had learned from her for several years as a child. The foundations were still there, picking it up again shouldn't be too difficult. The remaining issues were money and finding a suitable storefront. I stopped under an old locust tree at the edge of the county town and sat down on a stone block. Opening the wooden box, I found 3 silver rings, a pair of silver earrings, and the 30 yuan and teeny fan I had saved while working at the textile factory before marriage. This amount wasn't even enough to rent a storefront, let alone buy a sewing machine and fabric. My fingers brushed over the largest silver ring. This was part of my mother's dowry left to me, originally meant to be passed on to a daughter. But now it could become my first bit of startup capital. Still, I didn't plan to sell it right away. First, I would look for an affordable storefront and calculate exactly how much startup capital I needed. I stood up and walked into the county town, keeping an eye on the shops along the street. Most sold daily necessities or grain. Only a few had for rent signs. At the entrance to a quiet little alley, I spotted a small storefront with a faded paper note posted on the door. Store for sublet, monthly rent, tamped yuan. I walked over and knocked. An elderly woman with graying hair came out. She explained that it used to be her son's repair shop. Her son had moved away, so the space was sitting empty. She wanted to rent it out cheaply. I followed her inside. The storefront wasn't large, only about 10 square meters. There was an old counter and a wooden table. A sewing machine could fit in the corner. Though the location was a bit out of the way, it wasn't far from the military district, so officers could come conveniently. "Auntie, I'd like to rent this place. Could I pay 1 month's rent first and the rest next month?" I asked tentatively. I only had enough on hand for 1 month's rent, and I still needed money left over for fabric and supplies. The old lady looked me up and down. Deciding I didn't seem like a bad person, she sighed. "All right. You look like an honest girl. We'll do it your way. Just don't forget to pay the rest next month." I nodded gratefully and arranged to come sign the contract tomorrow. Stepping out of the alley with the storefront key clutched in my hand, I felt much more at ease. Next was gathering money to buy a sewing machine and fabric. It looked like I would have to sell that gold bracelet after all. By the time I was walking back with the key, the setting sun had already sunk behind the military district wall, stretching my shadow long across the ground. Passing by the largest jewelry shop in the county town, I stopped. Gold ornaments in the glass display case sparkled under the lights, identical to the luster of the gold bracelet in my wooden box. That bracelet was what my mother had pressed into my hand on her deathbed, saying it would help support me if I ever faced hardship. In my last life, I had clung to it through bitter days, only for Zhang Guoqiang to swindle it away and use it as gambling money. In this life, I would use it proactively to carve out a new path for myself. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the jewelry shop. The owner was a middle-aged man with a goatee, busy calculating accounts. "What can I get for you, miss?" He looked up, his gaze falling on the wooden box in my hands. I placed the box on the counter and carefully took out the gold bracelet. Years of wear had smoothed its edges. On the inside, a small Yun character was engraved. "Sir, how much would you give me for this?" The owner picked up the bracelet, examined it with a magnifying glass, then weighed it. "It's solid gold and the weight is decent. Gold prices aren't great right now. I can give you 120 yuan for it. How does that sound?" 420 yuan was more than I had expected. It would be enough to buy a sewing machine, stock up on fabric, and still leave some for signs and other costs. My fingertips brushed the engraved characters inside the bracelet. My heart ached, but I gritted my teeth and nodded. "Deal. We'll go with your price." The moment I received the money, I didn't feel sad. Instead, my whole body felt lighter. This bracelet was no longer just a keepsake hidden in a box. It had become the foundation that would help me stand firm on my own 2 feet. Early the next morning, I first went to sign the rental contract with the old lady and paid 1 month's rent. Then I headed straight to the second-hand market to hunt for a cheap sewing machine. The market was filled with used furniture and appliances. After circling several times, I finally spotted a black butterfly brand sewing machine in a corner. "How much for this sewing machine?" I asked the vendor, testing the pedal. It still turned smoothly. The vendor, a middle-aged man smoking a cigarette, replied, "This was my wife's. She doesn't make clothes anymore, and we want to clear some space. If you're serious, you can take it for 20 yuan. I'll even throw in a box of sewing needles." I haggled with him, and finally got it for 30 yuan. I hired a 3-wheeled cart to haul the sewing machine back to the shop, then went to the fabric wholesale market to select materials. Considering how often the officers trained, I specifically chose the most durable twill cotton fabric, mainly in military green and navy blue. I also bought several bundles of strong cotton thread and some thick needles. By the time I returned to the storefront, it was already dark. Under the streetlights, I moved the old counter to the corner and swept the floor clean. Looking at the empty room with only the sewing machine standing in the middle, I suddenly felt filled with strength. Over the next few days, I got up before dawn every day. I first bought a bucket of cheap lime wash and painted the walls myself. When the lime splattered on my hands and made them itch and burn, I simply rinsed them with cold water and continued. After the walls were white, I found a wooden board, painted custom military uniforms in red, and hung it above the storefront. During the day, I organized the shop. At night, I dug out my mother's old cutting shears, measuring tape, and basic pattern diagrams to study again at the table. The lines on the patterns were dense and complicated. Whenever I didn't understand something, I asked Auntie Li, who ran the tailoring shop next door. Auntie Li was kind. Not only did she teach me how to take measurements, but she also showed me how to adjust patterns according to body type, for example, widening the shoulders for broader shouldered people or raising the waistband for those with longer legs. After nearly half a month of busy work, the storefront was finally ready. The sewing machine gleamed, fabrics were neatly stacked on the counter, and several military uniform design sketches I had drawn hung on the wall. On opening day, I didn't set off firecrackers. I simply placed 2 pots of moss, roses I had dug up from the roadside by the door. Although no customers came, I sat in front of the sewing machine, running my hands over the smooth fabric, and felt incredibly at peace. I knew that behind this small door lay my future, not as a resentful woman orbiting Zhang Guoqiang, but as a businesswoman who earned her own keep. For the first 3 days after opening, the shop was so quiet you could hear a fly buzz. I sat at the sewing machine, fingers brushing the fabric, unable to help feeling a bit anxious. Had I made the wrong choice? Maybe the officers didn't need custom uniforms at all. On the morning of the 4th day, just as the sun climbed over the rooftops, a familiar voice came from the shop entrance. "Miss, can you really make properly fitted military uniforms here?" I looked up. It was the tall officer I had encountered at the corner store earlier. He wore an old uniform, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, pants noticeably too short, exposing his ankles. I quickly stood up. "Of course, please come in and have a seat. I'll take your measurements." His name was Wang Li, a platoon leader in the military district. After complaining to his comrades about the ill-fitting uniforms last time, he had heard from Aunt Zhang that a custom shop had opened in the family compound area and made a special detour to check it out. I took out my measuring tape and started from his shoulder width. While measuring, I asked, "Do you train a lot usually? Things like tactical crawling and carrying equipment?" "Every day," platoon leader Wang said with a smile. My previous uniform would tear at the knees after just 2 crawling drills. The sleeves were so tight, it was hard to even lift my arms. I noted it down. In that case, I'll widen the sleeves by 2 fingers and add an extra layer of lining at the knees. I'll use the most durable twill cotton fabric to ensure it lasts. If you're not in a hurry, you can pick it up in 3 days. Platoon leader Wang nodded and paid a 5 yuan deposit. Before leaving, he said, "If it turns out well, I'll send the men from my platoon your way." Over the next 3 days, I barely slept. During the day, I handled other tasks, and at night I worked the sewing machine. My fingers were pricked by the needle several times, but I simply put on a band-aid and kept going. Wang Jianjin's build was far from standard, sizing his shoulders 3 fingers wider than average and his inseam needing an extra 10 centimeters. Every step required careful double-checking to avoid mistakes. On the day he came to pick it up, platoon leader Wang tried on the uniform the moment he walked in. He raised his arms, turned around, and squatted down. The smile on his face couldn't be contained. It fits perfectly. Look, the sleeves don't constrict at all, and the knees have nice, thick padding. I won't have to worry about them wearing through during training anymore. He paid the remaining 8 yuan on the spot and pulled out paper and pen to note down the measurements of 5 other comrades in his platoon. He ordered 5 more uniforms on the spot. I'll tell the brothers when I get back. Make sure the quality is good. Platoon leader Wang was right. Just 2 days later, he brought 3 more comrades to the shop. After that, officers from other platoons started coming one after another. The batch of fabric I had bought earlier was completely used up in less than half a month. Even the 2 bolts of navy cloth I'd set aside were snapped up. Looking at the emptied-out fabric stack, I felt both thrilled and anxious, excited that business was good, anxious that without fabric, I couldn't accept new orders. I remembered Auntie Li mentioning that there was a large fabric factory in Lin City. Not only did they have more varieties, but the prices were cheaper than in the county town. That same afternoon, carrying the money left from selling the gold bracelet, I took the earliest bus to Lin City. The first time, I wandered the market for ages, but couldn't find the factory Auntie Li mentioned. The second time, I found the factory, but was told they were temporarily out of twill cotton stock, and it would take 3 days. The third time, I arrived at the factory gate at 5 in the morning, and finally managed to get 10 bolts of twill cotton and 5 bolts of navy fabric. By the time I loaded the fabric onto the returning bus, my arms were so sore I could barely lift them. Yet my heart felt warm and full. Back at the shop, I stayed up all night organizing the new fabric. The next morning when I opened the door, there were already officers waiting to place orders. At the end of the month, when I tallied the accounts, my hands trembled slightly as I looked at the numbers in the ledger. After deducting rent and fabric costs, I had netted 30 yuan. That was more than I had earned in half a year at the textile factory. I carefully placed the money at the very bottom of the wooden box. My heart felt incredibly steady. So this was what it felt like to earn money with my own hands, to hold up my own life. The sound of the sewing machine in the shop rarely stopped. I had just finished altering a uniform for a company commander and was about to hang it up when Auntie Zhang's voice came from the doorway. "Yun, you're busy, I see." My measuring tape was still wrapped around the fabric. I looked up to see Auntie Zhang standing at the door holding a cloth bag. Her eyes swept across the shop, lingering noticeably on the neatly folded military uniforms and the wooden box behind the counter. "Auntie Zhang, please come in. Are you here to have clothes made or altered?" I set down the tape and poured her a cup of cool water. Since the divorce, Auntie Zhang hadn't come looking for me on her own. This visit was probably not just for clothes. Auntie Zhang accepted the cup but didn't drink right away. She sighed, "Not for clothes. I was just passing by and wanted to see how you're doing. Your shop is doing really well. I hear quite a few officers come here to order clothes. You're truly capable." She paused, fingers tracing the rim of the cup as if choosing her words carefully. It's just that Guoqiang's situation hasn't been great lately. I had expected this. My face showed nothing as I continued organizing the fabric on the table. I don't know much about his affairs. You're not clear on the situation. Aunt Zhang lowered her voice. Ever since you left, Wang Li moved right in. She does nothing all day, no cooking, no laundry. All she knows is going out shopping. Every day, when Guoqiang comes home from training, there isn't even a hot meal waiting for him. The last time I went over, the bowls on the table had been piled up for days without being washed. Buttons missing from his uniform, and no one to sew them back on. My hands never stopped moving. The twill cotton fabric felt rough yet sturdy beneath my fingers, just like my life now plain on the surface, but far more solid than before. A few days ago I ran into Guoqiang. He was complaining that Wang Li spends a fortune every month on snacks and fabric for new dresses. The family savings are almost gone. Aunt Zhang glanced at me secretly before continuing. He even asked me if your shop was making good money and whether you might be willing to help him out, like making him a new uniform or well. The rest was pretty obvious. Zhang Guoqiang had seen that my business was thriving and wanted to take advantage of it. I set the fabric down and looked up at Aunt Zhang, my tone calm but resolute. Aunt Zhang Guoqiang and I are already divorced. By all rights, we're no longer family. Every cent in this shop I earned stitch by stitch with my own 2 hands. I have no obligation to support him. Aunt Zhang's face showed clear reluctance. I know you've been wronged, but after all, he's still. I cut her off. Back then, he was the one who claimed he was seriously ill and insisted on divorcing me so he wouldn't burden me. Now that I'm doing well, he suddenly wants me to help him out. There's no such thing as a free ride like that. I paused, the memory of him pushing me down the stairs in my last life, flashing through my mind, chilling my heart even further. If you see him, please pass on a message for me. From now on, we each live our own lives. Neither of us should disturb the other. Aunt Zhang studied my determined expression and realized further persuasion was useless. She could only nod. All right, I'll tell him exactly that. She didn't stay much longer. After finishing her water, she left. But not before glancing back at the busy shop with a complicated look in her eyes. Once Aunt Zhang was gone, I picked up the measuring tape again and continued working. Before long, platoon leader Wang arrived with 2 comrades to place an order. The moment he stepped inside, he grinned. A Yun, we're ordering 10 sets this time. All the brothers in our company are envious of my fitted uniform. They told me to come here for them. As he spoke, something seemed to occur to him. He added casually, "Oh right. Yesterday on the training ground, I ran into Zhang Guoqiang. He looked completely out of it, nearly tripped during drills. I heard things at home are pretty bad. Apparently he had a huge fight with that woman of his." My measuring tape paused for a fraction of a second, then resumed smoothly. I smiled at platoon leader Wang. Got it. 10 sets. Right, I'll note it down. You can pick them up in 5 days. Whether Zhang Guoqiang was doing well or not had nothing to do with me anymore. He had chosen his path. No matter how hard it got, he would have to walk it himself. Just like me right now, building a brighter and brighter future with my own hands. A future no one could ever take away. The sewing machine pedal made my ankles ache, and the stack of orders on the table rose like a small mountain. The one on top had been placed 3 days ago. The customer had already urged me twice. Yet, I still couldn't find the time to finish it. Ever since the shop opened, business had been soaring. Not only did officers come for uniforms, but their family members started asking whether I could make women's clothes too. Once, the wife of the military district's political commissar came, came in holding a piece of floral fabric. Yun, could you make me a kwai pao? The tailors in town either make them too loose or the collar doesn't sit right. You're meticulous with your work, I know. Know you'll get it perfect. At the time, I already had 5 military uniform orders waiting. But I forced a smile and said I would try. That night I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Sticking only to men's clothing would always have its limits. If I added women's wear, especially the kipiaos the families loved, I might open up an entirely new market. But I was only one person. I could barely keep up with the existing military orders, let alone kipiaos. A few nights earlier, while cutting fabric in the wee hours, I had nearly sliced my finger with the shears. Staring at the dark circles under my eyes in the mirror, I finally made up my mind. I needed a bigger storefront and to hire 2 helpers. The very next morning, I headed to the main street of the county town. My old shop had been tucked away in an alley convenient for the military district. But the main street had far more foot traffic. After searching for half the day, I finally found an empty storefront beside the supply and marketing cooperative. It was 3 times larger than my previous one, and even came with a small backyard for storage. The landlord was a white-haired old man. When he heard I ran a custom clothing business and had connections with the military district, he smiled. Young lady, this place was previously rented to someone selling shoes. But business was slow, so they left. If you're serious, I'll let you have it for 25 yuan, a month 5 yuan cheaper than the others. I signed a 3-month contract on the spot and paid the rent. Half the weight on my chest lifted. Next came hiring workers. The first person I thought of was Auntie Lai. She had been a tailor for decades, knew everyone, and had a sharp eye. In the evening, after closing the old shop, I brought 2 gin of fruit to Auntie Lai's house. She was sewing a quilt and quickly set her needle aside when she saw me. Yun, did you run into trouble? Not trouble. I want to ask for your help. I explained that I planned to hire tailors but had no experience and didn't know who was reliable. If you know any trustworthy people, please recommend them. Auntie Lai thought for a moment. There's Auntie Zhao from the East End and Sister Zhou from the West Side. Both are excellent tailors and honest people. Auntie Zhao used to work in a state-run garment factory and knows Western-style cutting. Sister Zhou specializes in kipiaos. Didn't you want to add kipao styles? Perfect. The very next day, I asked Auntie Lai to bring the 2 women over and had them each make a sample. Auntie Zhao produced a men's shirt with neat stitches and a beautifully curved collar. Sister Zhou made a plain kipai pao with exquisite knotted buttons and a perfectly tailored waistline. I hired them on the spot, offering each 20 yuan a month, 5 yuan, more than they had been earning before. Renovating the new storefront took 5 days. I painted the walls a soft beige, placed 2 tables by the windows for customers to choose fabrics, and partitioned off a small storeroom in the backyard. On opening day, I didn't hold any ceremony, but platoon leader Wang showed up early with several comrades and even helped carry 2 potted pothos plants to the entrance. A new shop needs a fresh look, he said with a grin. Auntie Zhao and Sister Zhou caught on quickly. Auntie Zhao took charge of military uniforms and men's civilian wear, while Sister Zhou focused on kipiaos and women's clothing. I especially stocked up on silk and floral fabrics. The very first floral kai pao Sister Zhou made was bought the same day by the wife of the political department director, who promised to bring friends. In less than 2 months, the kipiaos in the new shop had become our signature item. Even girls from the county town started coming in to order. At the end of the month, I spread the ledger on the table and added up every entry. When I reached 102,360 yuan, I rubbed my eyes and counted again. It really was over 100,000. I divided the money into 3 portions. One set aside as emergency funds, one for purchasing new fabric, and the rest split between Auntie Zhao and Sister Zhou 50 yuan bonuses each. Watching them smile and say, "Working for a Yun really has a future," warmed my heart. It turned out that not only could I live well on my own, I could lift others up with me. That feeling was more satisfying than any amount of money. When the red wooden doors of the military district auditorium swung open, most of the seats were already filled. Rows of military green chairs stood neatly in line. The front rows held the district leadership, while the back and sides were packed with family members. Murmurs of conversation mixed with the sweet scent of locust blossoms drifting in through the windows. I clutched my speech notes, quietly rolling up the cuffs of the crisp white shirt Sister Zhou had specially made for me. The delicate white embroidery around the collar made it look far sharper than my usual work clothes. Platoon leader Wang walked over from the front, smiling as he patted my arm. "Yun, don't be nervous. Just talk like you usually do with us. You've built such a successful business. Everyone should learn from you." I nodded, but my heart still tightened a little. Half a month earlier, the political department had notified me that they were holding a commendation meeting for family members who had started businesses and wanted me to speak as a representative. They had even asked for last year's revenue figures. When I reported 1 million yuan, the clerk delivering the notice had stared at me for a long moment and asked twice to confirm. "Will the family representative, Comrade Lin Yun, please come to the stage to speak?" The announcer's clear, female voice rang out. I took a deep breath and walked the red carpet. Every eye in the audience turned toward me. I instinctively scanned the crowd and quickly spotted Zhang Guoqiang in the back row. He wore a faded, washed-out military uniform, hair disheveled. Beside him sat Wang Li in a new floral kipao. But the knotted buttons at the collar were crooked and the hem wrinkled, clearly neglected. Zhang Guoqiang's gaze landed on me. Surprise flashed across his face, then sank into something darker. His fingers tightened around the cap resting on his knee. I reached the microphone, adjusted its height, and looked out at the familiar faces. Officers who regularly ordered uniforms, family members who had sent me customers, and Aunt Zhang, who had once urged me to think things over. She sat in the middle row, and when our eyes met, gave me an encouraging nod full of warmth. "Respected leaders, comrades, and family members, hello, I am Lin Yun." My voice carried steadily through the microphone, firmer than I had expected. 1 year ago, I opened a tiny custom tailoring shop. At the time, I had only one second-hand sewing machine and had to make 3 trips to scrape together enough fabric. I didn't dwell on the hardships. I simply spoke about how I modified uniforms to suit the officers' training needs, how I learned tailoring from Auntie Li, and how Auntie Zhao and Sister Zhao and I worked together to expand into women's wear. The audience listened in silence, the only sound the soft scratch of pens on paper. Occasionally, someone looked up at me with clear approval. Last year, our shop served more than 300 customers and produced over 500 custom military uniforms, dresses, and kipaos. After deducting rent, fabric, and labor costs, our net profit came to. I paused, meeting the expectant gazes below, and spoke the number clearly. 1 million yuan. The moment the words left my mouth, the auditorium erupted. "What, 1 million? My God, that's more than 10 years of our company's salary combined." I heard her business was good, but I never imagined it was this good. Whispers surged like a tide. I saw a family member's pen clatter to the floor. In the front row, the political commissar exchanged a stunned glance with the director beside him, then began to clap. The applause grew louder and louder until the entire hall rang with it. I glanced toward the back row again. Zhang Guoqiang's face had gone deathly pale. His lips moved as if he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Wang Li beside him sat frozen, handkerchief dangling from her hand, eyes fixed on me in utter disbelief. Zhang Guoqiang's fingers clenched even tighter, knuckles white, wrinkling his already rumpled uniform further. The look he gave me no longer held the same malice from before. Instead, it was laced with complex emotions, shock, resentment, and something I couldn't quite read. In the future, I plan to hire more staff to produce durable training uniforms, specially designed for rigorous drills, as well as more practical and beautiful clothing for the families. I continued, my voice growing firmer. As long as we're willing to put in the effort and work steadily, we family members can carve out our own bright futures with our own hands. When I finished, the applause was even more thunderous than before. As I stepped down from the stage, platoon leader Wang immediately came forward, clapping me on the shoulder. Well said. Yun, you've really brought honor to all of us family members. Aunt Zhang walked over too, taking my hand. I always knew you were capable, but I never imagined you'd be this capable. You're truly remarkable. I smiled and responded graciously. In my peripheral visions, Zhang Guoqiang had already stood up and was walking out with his head down. Wang Li hurried after him. Their backs looked unusually hurried, as if they were fleeing something. I looked away, my heart completely calm. That 1 million yuan had been earned stitch by stitch. Trip after trip to fabric factories across 3 cities, and countless late nights with Auntie Zhao and Sister Zhou. It was mine, fair and square, and had nothing more to do with Zhang Guoqiang. When the red sedan pulled up in front of the shop, Sister Zhou was showing a customer the newly arrived silk fabric. Seeing me get out, she waved with a smile. Yun, that car looks sharp. No more squeezing onto the bus when you go to Lin City for fabric. I smiled in reply and locked the door. I had ordered the car last month with nearly half a year's profits. It was meant to make factory runs easier. I never expected that the first time I drove it back, I would run into someone I never wanted to see again. Lin Yun. A hoarse voice came from behind the tree, beside the shop. I turned and saw Zhang Guoqiang standing there. He wore the same faded old uniform, sleeves frayed at the cuffs, pant legs splattered with mud. His old canvas shoes had split open, revealing gray socks underneath. His hair was a mess and his chin, covered in stubble. He looked more than 10 times more haggard than the last time I had seen him at the commendation meeting. My heart remained undisturbed. I merely frowned. Is something wrong? He took 2 unsteady steps forward, eyes locked on the car keys in my hand, then sweeping over the bright display windows of the shop. His Adam's apple bobbed. You're really living well now. That car must have cost a fortune. Huh. None of your business. I slipped the keys into my pocket and turned to enter the shop. But he suddenly lunged forward and reached for my arm. Yun, don't go. His fingers had barely brushed my sleeve when I jerked away sharply. His hand hung awkwardly in mid-air, embarrassment flashing across his face. His voice dropped even lower, laced with pleading. I know I was wrong. I lost my mind back then. I shouldn't have faked illness to divorce you. I shouldn't have gotten involved with Wang Li. Can you give me another chance? Passers-by and customers had already stopped to watch. The shop assistant little Min stepped out and stood protectively beside me, eyeing Zhang Guoqiang warily. I looked at the bloodshot veins in his eyes and his pitiful expression. but felt not a shred of sympathy. In my last life, when he had pushed me down the stairs, he had shown no such humility. Wrong about what? I crossed my arms, voice steady. Wrong about faking illness to trick me into divorcing you. Or wrong about Wang Li running through your entire fortune, before you remembered I existed. His face flushed crimson, then drained of color. His lips trembled. Wang Li, she took the last of my money and ran off with someone else. She left me with a mountain of debt. I'm about to lose even the place I'm renting. I keep making mistakes during training. Leadership has talked to me multiple times already. His voice grew more agitated, louder. Yun, I know you're kind-hearted. You used to care about me the most. You're so successful now. Your shop is doing so well. Help me. Can we get back together? I'll treat you right from now on. I won't argue with you anymore. I'll listen to everything you say. Tears welled in his eyes as he reached for me again. They slid down his stubbled cheeks. I really know I was wrong. Just forgive me this once, okay? That's enough. I cut him off. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped him cold. The murmurs around us quieted. Every eye turned our way. Zhang Guoqiang, back then you were the one who claimed you had a terminal illness and insisted on divorcing me, so you wouldn't burden me. I looked straight into his eyes, enunciating every word. I agreed and I wished you well. But now that your life has fallen apart, you come looking for me to reconcile. Do you really think that's possible? I gestured behind me at the shop. The life I have now was built stitch by stitch and trip after trip across 3 cities to fabric factories. It has nothing to do with you. The path you chose, whether good or bad, you have to walk it to the end yourself. He stood there frozen, tears still clinging to his face. But he said nothing more. He simply stared at me blankly. Little Min, I turned to the assistant. Please show him out. Don't disturb the customers. Little Min stepped forward immediately. Sir, please leave. We still have a business to run. Zhang Guoqiang looked at me, then at the customers inside the shop. The color drained from his face completely. Like a deflated balloon, he staggered back 2 steps, turned, and walked away slowly. His back was hunched, each step seeming to weigh 1,000 pounds. I looked away and smiled apologetically at the onlookers. Sorry for the spectacle, everyone. We're still running a promotion. Keep Hayaz our Thuf and Cham off today. Feel free to come in and take a look if you're interested. The customers filed back into the shop, and the earlier disturbance faded quickly. Little Min leaned close. Sister Yun, you were really cool just now. That kind of person doesn't deserve any kindness from you. I smiled but said nothing. Sunlight fell warmly on my shoulders. The car keys in my hand still carried the heat of the engine. This hard-won stability was mine, earned by my own efforts, and no one could take it away. When the glass door opened, the young receptionist at the front desk smiled and handed me the freshly printed order report. Sister Yun, the Military District Logistics Department's quarterly order has come through. This time, it's 5,000 training uniforms and 2,000 winter garments for family members. I took the report, my fingertips tracing the number 5,000. I couldn't help thinking back 3 years ago when I had still been in that 10-square-meter shop in the alley, pedaling the sewing machine to finish 5 uniform orders and barely finding time to drink a sip of water. Now the sign for Lin Yun Clothing Company hung on the busiest street in the county town. Inside the 3-story building, the design department, production department, and logistics department each handled their own duties. More than 30 employees worked efficiently and without chaos. Even military districts in neighboring cities placed orders with us. I handed the report back. Forward it to production and have Sister Zhao keep an eye on the fabric. Training uniforms need the most durable twill cotton with a thin fleece lining, so they stay warm during winter drills. I turned and headed toward my office. In the hallway, I met Sister Zhou, who was carrying several new Qipao design sketches, eyes sparkling. Yun, take a look at these updated Qipao designs. I added hidden buttons and pockets. The families are going to love them. The commissar's wife asked, just the other day when we'd release new designs. I flipped through the sketches. The soft purple fabric featured delicate plum blossom embroidery, and the collar had been refined for a cleaner line. It was far more practical than traditional kipios. Go ahead and make samples with this one. Next week we'll organize a fitting for the families. If it works, we'll move to mass production. Sister Zhou smiled brightly and walked off with light steps, her back far straighter than it had been 3 years ago. She was now head of the design department, mentoring apprentices and regularly attending training sessions in the city. Confidence radiated from her. My office window overlooked the street. People came and went below. Occasionally, a figure in uniform would pass by, look up, and wave cheerfully at our employees. Last month, at the Military District's Forum for Military Families, the political commissar had specifically mentioned our company. Comrade Lin Yun not only succeeded in her own venture, but also created jobs for more than 20 family members. She is a true role model for the families of our military district. That day, Aunt Zhang had sat in the audience and told the person beside her, I always knew Yun was capable. When she got divorced, I was actually worried for her. Turns out I was worrying for nothing. In the afternoon, while buying fruit at the market, I spotted a familiar figure in the distance. Zhang Guoqiang wore a faded old jacket and carried a tattered cloth bag containing 2 wilted cabbages. He was squatting by the roadside haggling with a vendor. Voice low, the wrinkles on his forehead far deeper than they had been 3 years ago. I heard he had been transferred to logistics after repeated training errors and had received a formal warning from the army over his debts. Wang Li had run off with the last of his money and never returned. He now rented a cramped little room and scraped by. I didn't greet him. I simply carried my fruit and walked past slowly. He didn't seem to notice me. He was still bargaining with the vendor, fingers repeatedly counting the small change in his pocket. The man before me no longer possessed even a trace of the stubborn arrogance he had shown 3 years ago when he faked illness to force a divorce. I felt neither resentment nor pity, only the quiet understanding that every person chooses their own path. He had chosen the shortcut, and ending up here was exactly what anyone could have expected. Back at the company, the accountant came in with the quarterly report, smiling. Sister Yun, this quarter's net profit exceeded expectations again. Counting our earlier reserves, we've now crossed the 10 million yuan mark. I took the report and looked at the numbers with perfect calm. Every yuan had been earned together with my employees, stitch by stitch and trip after trip to factories. Every cent was earned honestly. That evening, after the shop closed and the employees had left one by one, I did one final check of the doors and windows. As I locked up, I glanced back at the Lin Yun Clothing Company sign. The street lamp light fell warmly across it. 3 years ago today, I had just walked out of the military family compound, carrying a canvas bag, standing on the roadside with no idea what the future held. Now I had my own company, a team of partners who worked alongside me, the respect of others, and the confidence to face whatever came next. In the days ahead, I plan to expand our business to the military districts in neighboring provinces and open another brick and mortar women's clothing store so more people would know our brand. As for Zhang Guoqiang, he had been nothing more than a brief interlude on the road of my life. Once he had passed out of my life, he would never affect me again. My days would only grow brighter and brighter, like the flowers blooming by my door, always turning toward the light, always moving forward step by steady step.